Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a closer look at a powerful submachine gun in the game, the Primal Rage. It's a favourite among many players for its fast-paced, aggressive playstyle and self-sustaining mechanics. I wanted to see just how overpowered we could make it with the right setup, and trust me, things are about to get wild. So what exactly makes the Primal Rage so unique? Well, every time you hit an enemy, there's a 35% chance to gain a stack of the fast gunner effect. When your magazine is down to just one bullet, the weapon can consume 1% of your max HP and some spare ammo to keep you firing. Your HP won't drop below 1. So basically what that means is you will never have to reload whilst in a fight. Each shot that hits heals you for 0.1% of your max HP per fast gunner stack. Plus, for every 1% change in your HP, you gain a plus 1% weapon damage boost that lasts 5 seconds. These boosts stack independently and go all the way up to plus 80% extra weapon damage. So the goal is to stack fast gunner quickly, sustain your health through hits, and abuse the HP change to damage mechanic for massive DPS bursts. Now normally this is where I'd bring out a 3-piece treacherous set, but due to the recent update, the Saviour set has become potentially a better option to run. So for this build we're running only a 2-piece treacherous set, which gives us a weapon and status damage increase of 12%. Now onto our Saviour set. When using a 2-piece Saviour set, you gain plus 10% weapon and status damage while shielded. Before the update, running a 3-piece Saviour set gave bonuses to HP and psi intensity. It wasn't commonly used in PvE, but it dominated in PvP. However, since the update, the 3-piece bonus has changed. Wearing a 3-piece now causes you to consume 8% of your current HP when hit, generating a temporary shield equal to 5% of your max HP, lasting for 30 seconds. This effect has a 0.5 second cooldown and won't trigger if your temporary shield is already above 40% of your max HP. And each time HP is consumed, you gain a plus 5% weapon and status damage, which can stack up to 4 times, with each stack lasting 12 seconds. For our key item slot, there are 2 strong options to consider. The Charmed Mag Top. When you're in fast gunner status, the lower your ammo or magazine capacity, the higher your chance to trigger an extra bullet when firing. At 1% ammo, that chance goes up to 40%. And the Oasis Mask, which increases fast gunner max stacks by plus 10 and grants plus 1% attack per stack. The Charmed Mag Top offers higher raw DPS, but the Oasis Mask provides more survivability. Now normally I'd go full DPS and run with the Charmed Mag Top. However, I've noticed a major issue when using it. You're often sitting at 1 HP due to how the build works, and if even a small ad manages to bypass your shield, that 1 HP vanishes instantly. And once you go down, it becomes really hard to regain control with this setup. That's why I've decided to run the Oasis Mask instead. While my HP still stays low, having a bit more buffer gives me time to reassess and recover if something slips through my defences. Now, for our secondary weapon, we're obviously going with something that can trigger Bullseye, since the build relies on that plus 8% vulnerability debuff, but there are a few solid options to consider depending on your playstyle and consistency with weak spot hits. First, we have the recurve bow. If you can consistently land weak spot hits with a crossbow style weapon, the recurve bow is your best pick. Hitting a weak spot applies the Bullseye debuff to the target. While Bullseye is active, all weapons gain plus 15% crit rate against that target for 10 seconds. Since this build focuses heavily on crit scaling, that plus 15% crit rate is a huge DPS boost, as long as you are accurate. Second, we have the Bullseye Sniper. This is a more forgiving option if you struggle with precision shots. Hitting a weak spot grants plus 25% weak spot damage for 10 seconds, and this effect can stack up to 4 times. Additionally, defeating an enemy with a weak spot hit gives you a plus 15% attack for 20 seconds. You won't get the crit rate from the recurve, but this still boosts your damage significantly, especially in longer fights where stacks build up. And lastly, we have the DE50 Wildfire. This has a 60% chance to trigger Bullseye on hit, 80% chance to spread Bullseye to nearby enemies. If no other enemies are within a 15-meter radius, you gain a plus 25% weapon damage for 10 seconds. Hitting the weak spot of Bullseye marked enemies also grants a plus 3% attack for 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This weapon is great for crowd control and for builds that benefit from spreadable debuffs, and solo target bursts when isolated. Pick based on how you play. All 3 are viable. Okay, now let's turn this into this. Okay, let's talk Deviants. And this build absolutely needs this one. Without it, yeah, there's no build. We're using the Lone Wolf Whisper, specifically the Lunar Oracle variant, and here's why. The Lunar variant gives us a flat plus 5% weapon damage, which is then multiplied by 1.5 times when your sanity drops below 30%. Perfect synergy for low sanity builds. Now, this Deviant automatically attacks enemies and pulls aggro from nearby enemies, which is perfect as we want to kill everything before they turn on us. When an enemy dies, it spawns a clone, and that clone applies a debuff that increases the weapon damage the target receives by 50%. Well, that's in my case, because I'm using a level 5 Lone Wolf Whisper. Now, the level of your Deviant affects this debuff. For example, a level 4 only increases weapon damage by 43.8%, so keep that in mind when choosing your setup. Now onto our mods, starting with the main gun. For our Primal Rage, we're going to be taking Shooting Blitz, the Fast Gunner variant. This mod gives us a plus 4 seconds to our duration of Fast Gunner, and also a flat plus 15% to our weapon damage. You want to focus on weapon and crit attributes. As you can see, I haven't rolled a great roll, however this build still works, so if you have better, watch that DPS go up. For our secondary, we're taking Vulnerability Amplifier. The Bullseye adds plus 8% vulnerability. We want to focus on crit damage and duration. The longer the buff is active, the less we have to proc it. Let's move on to our gear mods, starting with the helmet. We're taking Momentum Up, the Lunar variant. This mod gives us a plus 10% fire rate for the first 50% of the magazine, and more importantly, a plus 30% weapon damage during the second half. Since this build runs consistently on one bullet, we're always in that second half, meaning we'll have a plus 30% weapon damage active at all times while we're fighting. For attributes, we're going with quick damage and weapon damage. Next up is the mask, and we're using Blitzkrieg, the Fast Gunner variant. This gives us a plus 5 Fast Gunner stacks, plus a plus 1% fire rate for each stack. That's a solid fire rate boost scaling directly with your core mechanic. Once again, for attributes, we're prioritizing crit damage and weapon damage. For the chest, we're taking Rejuvenating with the Lunar variant. This mod activates when your shield is above 30% of your max HP. Defeating an enemy then restores 20% of your max HP. Any excess recovery is converted into a temporary shield that lasts 20 seconds. It's a great sustain option for a build that lives dangerously close to the edge. Attributes stay the same, crit damage and weapon damage. Moving on to the legs, we're using Deadshot, the Downstar variant. Each critical hit with a non-melee weapon grants us a plus 5% crit damage, stacking up to 45%. The effect is removed upon the next reload, but since we're not reloading with Primal Rage, that's not a problem. The Downstar variant gives us a bonus crit and weapon damage when we're above an enemy, which happens often during real fights. Attributes here are also crit damage and weapon damage. For the gloves, we're using Crit Boost, the Crescent variant. It gives a flat plus 15% crit rate, which is perfect for a crit-focused setup. The Crescent variant also gives a bonus based on your shield level, adding another layer of synergy with our shield-focused gear. Again, go with crit damage and weapon damage for attributes. Finally, onto our shoes, which are Rush Hour, the Violent variant. Every 10% HP loss grants plus 4% melee weapon and status damage. Since Primal Rage constantly drains HP, this gives us a reliable and scaling damage boost as the fight goes on. Attributes, as always, are crit damage and weapon damage. This setup gives you the perfect blend of raw damage, crit scaling, and shield-based survivability, all while syncing perfectly with Primal Rage's aggressive playstyle. I would also like to add that we want to be running our sanity at not absolute. Now we're moving on to our food and drink buffs. Now, obviously, we have our no chefs and our chefs of the once human world. So if you ain't a chef, then you want to prioritize taking the mixed fried hot dog. This gives us a flat plus 20% damage to enemies affected by bullseye. Now, if you add the mimetic advanced gourmand and a level 5 chefosaurus, we gain an extra plus 7% to this dish. Also, adding deer meat will give us a plus 2%. So in total, we can gain an extra 9%. For our drink, we want to be taking Starry Bubble Tea. Now, this grants us a shield equal to 5% of our max HP per second while gliding, out of combat, with the shield amount capped at 50% of your max HP. The reason we're taking this is because I do not have Lunar Gummies unlocked yet, but regardless of the out of combat part, we automatically gain 2 bars of shield we can fill ourselves through using the gun, gear sets, and mods. This allows us to have maximum shield capacity. Now, if you are taking the chef class, you want to be adding the crumbly bread to our food, which gives us a flat plus 25% to our weapon damage. Once again, I'm using the advanced gourmand and level 5 chef, so I gain an extra 9%. As for your drink, I usually take Stardust Energy Drink. This gives me a double jump, so I'm able to glide in the air to gain shield before I enter a fire. Okay, now let's move on to our Cradle slots. As I run most of my content with a sniper, I can take just the anti-phase. Next, we want to be taking Resilience. Our shield takes 30% less damage from monsters, and as most of our HP is shield, this is perfect Cradle slot to add to your build. Next, we have Tactical Combo, and this gives us a weapon damage increase of 15% for 4 seconds after switching weapons. Next up, we have Deviant Energy Defense. Now, whenever we call upon our Deviant, we gain a shield equal to 30% of our max HP, which lasts 30 seconds. Once again, a great tool for our survivability. Next, we're taking Shield Protection. When our shield is above 40%, we gain a plus 10% damage boost to monsters. Moving on, we have Steady Hand. When we have a buff like Fast Gunner, our weapon damage goes up by 10% and our weak spot damage goes up by 25%. Mark Strike is next, and this gives us a plus 20% weak spot damage boost against enemies marked with bullseye. And lastly, we have Fast Pursuit. Upon triggering Fast Gunner, we gain one of the following effects for 12 seconds. Attack plus 3%, crit rate plus 3%, or crit damage plus 8%, which can stack up to 5 times. Okay, now to finalise this build, we're taking the Kukuri Knife. Now, defeating a target grants all weapons a plus 30% tack and 15% crit rate per 10 seconds. Pairing this with a sticky ice cube, we can consistently proc this buff. So that's the Primal Rage, a weapon that doesn't just reward aggressive play, it demands it. It's fast, it's risky, and if you're not living on the edge of your HP bar, are you even using it right? Between the crit scaling, the constant healing, and the low ammo mechanic, it turns every fight into a balancing act. One part DPS, one part survival, and a little bit of controlled chaos. If you enjoy high risk, high reward playstyles and don't mind living on the edge, literally, then I'd absolutely recommend giving this build a try. It's hectic, but when it works, it really works. If you found this build helpful, entertaining, or just mildly stressful, feel free to leave a like, maybe subscribe, and let me know how long you lasted at 1 HP. Thanks for watching, and good luck out there. You're going to need it.